Hello, my name is Dr. Ruthie, or Dr. Ruth Newstifter if you want to be formal. I'm a professional sexuality educator, and I blog over at exploringintimacy.com. And thanks to the great folks at Funwares, I'm here answering your questions on bondage and other fun and sexy topics. If you want to send me a question, send it to AskDrRuthie, AskDrRuthie, at funwares.com, and thanks to Funwares for making this possible. And as you might have guessed from what I said earlier, we have a question about bondage this time, so I'm very excited to answer this one. Dear Dr. Ruthie, my boyfriend and I want to try bondage together, but we're kind of scared. We don't want to hurt each other or have it go wrong. Thanks for any tips or advice, Mark and John. Mark and John, I'm so glad that you sent in this question, and I'm so happy that the two of you want to explore fun things together, like bondage. And bondage is not for everyone, but if it's something that interests the two of you, then a little bit of light exploratory bondage can be a lot of fun and increase your intimacy and your communication, and also give you something exciting to explore and, you know, keep stuff from getting stale or whatever. So very good, Mark and John. Let's talk about what we can do. The first thing I want you to do is have a good conversation about what each of you are thinking about when you think of doing bondage together. Who's tying up who? How are you tying each other up? What is the goal of tying each other up? Just to be tied up or to do something else with each other? What kind of fantasies do you have about bondage? How do you imagine it? Where? What positions? What is it about bondage that turns you on? And talk about these things with each other, because sometimes we get shy around these topics, or we think, oh, you know, but they don't know. We each have our own idea of why we do or don't like bondage, and just because we have an idea for ourselves doesn't mean it matches for our partner. So it's really important to have that conversation. It can be a very sexy, fun kind of conversation. It should be a conversation that increases your intimacy with each other, and you know, it feels vulnerable, but that means that you can get closer to each other emotionally through that conversation too. So that's another good reason to have that talk. So make sure that you settle upon some interests and goals that you have in common with the bondage, or that one of you likes and the other is neutral about, and then you're going to swap-a-roo, and then the other person does something that is neutral for them because you like it. So we want to have clear communication about these things and a good balance to it, so that we're all getting what we like and not doing anything the other person dislikes or is weirded out by. So we want to start, you know, real basic. And one of the really important basic things to get settled and set right away with bondage is that you want it to be safe and you want it to be enjoyable, however you define enjoyable. But safe means that you're not stuck tied up in some way where you're getting hurt or where you can't get out if you suddenly want to or need to. That will hurt your body or harm your body in some way, that will leave you undesirably vulnerable if one or the other of you has a medical concern that acts up, or that is triggering for you in some sort of emotional way that you can't communicate and can't get out of. So when we're just exploring bondage, we want to start in a light-hearted way, and we can always read and learn more about it and move forward from there. And we want to make sure that we understand how we're going to communicate with each other about what we like and don't like. The easiest way is if you're just very open and say, I will tell you what I like and what I don't like, so listen to what I have to say and go with it. That's the person getting tied, talking to the person who's tying, but also it's important for the person who's tying to communicate too. I'm really scared that I'm hurting you or that I'm being creepy right now, you know, and the other person can assure you or say, yeah, it kind of feels like that to me too, let's adjust it a little bit. Some folks want to have what's called a safe word, which means a secret code word that both of you know and will remember and feel comfortable saying and using, that lets the other person know that they need to stop. And everybody needs to get untied, and it just needs to end, and we need to snuggle and get a glass of water right away. Sometimes people want to be tied up and they want to say no, no, no. In which case, you don't want the word no to be what the other person, you know, uses to determine that they need to untie you, because it actually means you're having fun. So that means that you need to pick a different word that you can say. But even if the word no really does mean no to you, make sure you tell the other person so that they don't mistake it for that kind of fantasy role play no. So we're going to begin simple, escapable, safe, and comfy. We're going to have a good pair of EMT bandage scissors. They're really strong scissors that have a rounded tip so they can slide under rope or, you know, bathrobes, sashes, or leather, or whatever it is that you're using. And we're just going to try a little bit of bondage at a time. And remember, we don't necessarily need gear for bondage. It can be clasping hands with the person and holding their hand down. It can be flinging a leg over their leg so they feel a little bit trapped. Whatever meets your interests. But you can also use just stuff from around the house, a thick, comfortable rope that's not tied too tightly that you can just cut off when you're done with it. You can buy yourself some sexy, leather, plastic, or whatever material is kind of gear, like handcuffs. I really do not recommend metal handcuffs. They're very uncomfortable and dig in. You have to line them with washcloths. So get some like nice kind of bracey, thicker ones that are comfortable to move around in. Get a little bit creative with it, but don't tie anything too tight, and don't tie too many places at once. Just start real basic immobilizing type stuff. Also, like I mentioned earlier, pay attention if anyone has medical issues. If somebody, is prone to pass out or has heart problems or breathing problems, don't do anything that's going to aggravate that, and make sure the other person can get out of the bondage if that happens. Or the person tying them up can untie the other person even if they pass out and their body is heavy and they have to move it manually. These things are important to consider. So the simpler and the more easygoing we go with it, the fewer safety precautions we have to take, because it's just easier to deal with that. We want to make sure that we are weaving in our fantasy and dirty talk with this too, because oftentimes people like bondage for just the experience of being tied, but also oftentimes people like it because there's a fantasy that goes with it too. So talking about that ahead of time and being able to weave in a little dirty talk and match your body language and the way you're tying each other with those fantasies is really important. Remember, your partner can't know what's really turning you on unless you tell them. So make sure you're communicating that with each other, and you'll learn fun stuff about each other at the same time. You also want to weave in your favorite kind of pleasure. Some people like to be bound just for the joy of being bound, or just for the fantasy of being bound. Other people want to be bound and stimulated, or bound and spanked, or bound and talked dirty to, or bound and dressed up, or whatever the case may be. So whatever it is that gives you pleasure, sexual stimulation or otherwise, communicate that with each other and figure out how you can incorporate that into your bondage in an enjoyable way as well. And you want to make sure that you end while it's still fun. Even if your bondage fantasies are kind of extreme, when you're just beginning playing with bondage, end on a high note. We've had a lot of fun, we've had some good stimulation, now we're going to get rid of the bondage and either continue with a different sexual activity or go have some ice cream. When you're just beginning and exploring, even if the fantasy is intense, you don't want to take it to that level. Not in the beginning, not until you've got a better feel for each other and how bondage works together. And begin with, brief kinds of bondage. Do it for a few minutes and work it into the middle of your sexual play. It doesn't have to be a giant event. We're exploring and learning together, so we can take it in little baby steps and bite sizes, and always do it again and have more fun the next time if it works out well. I'm Dr. Ruthie. I hope that those tips help you to begin to explore bondage in a way that you both enjoy. Keep it lighthearted and fun and exploratory together, and just keep a little mind to safety, and John and Mark, you guys will have nothing to be afraid of. I'm Dr. Ruthie. Have fun, and I'll see you at the next video.